There are sort of two things I learned there. One is don't do that.
Hello and welcome to Did I Do That? Season 5. Guys, Burgers, and Fries. It's a podcast about graphic designers and the food that's not from Five Guys Burgers and Fries that we make on the way to making the kind of food that Five Guys Burgers and Fries does make, which is burgers and presumably fries. Because it's all part of the process. I'm Sean Schumacher, and joining me today, a very special guest, a legend of the Portland design scene. She's previously art directed the Portland Mercury before starting her own studio, Fort Wick, where she's worked with a familiar roster ranging from PSU's College of the Arts to XOXO Festival to Oregon Humanities and more. These days, she leads the design team at Port of Portland, and you can see some of her team's latest work when you're hopping onto your next flight at the new Portland International Airport. It's Jen Wick. Hi.
Hello.
So nice to have you here, Jen.
So nice to be here.
So nice of you to come out here this morning in just like the beginning of autumn here in Portland, where there's no consistent weather pattern from 1 minute to the next. Presumably, I'm going to open the door next and it's just going to be hailing. It's great. It's great. It's great. Speaking of things that are going like really great and normal and successful and good, have you been to Five Guys Burgers and Fries before? Is that a restaurant that you frequent or have ever been to even one time?
I have not. Is that the way a sponsorship is supposed to go?
Well, I we're in the stage of capitalism where, like, kind of experimentations like this, I feel like.
So it's like a pressure of like getting a sponsor.
Basically,
it's like courting a sponsor in a very unique and creative way, unexpected way.
Yeah, I feel like trying to like make the sponsor feel like they're getting some value, and then maybe eventually I will get some money in exchange. Granted, I've not done a very good job of creating that value by, say, constantly talking about how I can't eat anything at their restaurant, so we'll never go there. And also their restaurants make me feel sad because they just have loose potatoes in sacks on the floor.
What do you mean? There's like French fries on the floor?
No, one of the many great aesthetic choices that the Five Guys restaurant does to make the ambiance sort of like you're in a warehouse when you walk into it
is a rustic potato bag look.
Basically, as you line up, you have to pass by the bags of potatoes that they have on pallets that presumably they are going to cook up at some point.
I wasn't expecting all this Five Guys content, I must say. I've never been to Five Guys, but the way you're talking about them makes me intrigued. It makes me want to maybe take a trip there with my family.
That's what I love to hear, is just like how inspired all the good words that we've said, and good is the right way to phrase it.
Are the French fries salty?
I couldn't tell you. I assume I would have to think they would.
It's hard to get French fries wrong.
That's a very good point. And French fries are in the name, so like at the very least they're suggesting like that's the thing to eat rather than their weird shakes that can contain bacon. I don't know. I don't really understand the things that are happening at Five Guys. But anyway, so they have not been like so into this in as much as they don't seem to know that I exist at all, or that this is happening. So they're not an
official sponsor. They're more of an unofficial sponsor.
It's more that, and also there's no money being exchanged. So
you're like trolling Five Guys.
I don't know what you mean. But yeah, I think I'm starting to get feeling, I don't know. I'm feeling like maybe this is not working so far, and I don't think it's working.
I think it's time to rethink the strategy.
Well, that's exactly what we're doing today, because I was thinking about the movie She's All That, and how Rachel E. Cook's character is like, oh, nobody notices her, and then she takes off her glasses and lets down her hair, and Sixpence None the Richer plays, and all of a sudden she's the hottest girl in town. I want to be the hottest girl in town. I want to make Five Guys a little jealous. I want to, show them
the power of this.
Yeah, it could be us if they weren't playing, that kind of thing. So This time we're going to do just that. So I found 2 brands. That's right. Not just one, 2 brands that are working real hard for my sort of brand synergy experiment business. So take that, Five Guys. These are none other than 2 of the biggest brands on earth. Of course, I'm talking about Coca-Cola and Oreo. So this is sort of a follow-up, weirdly, on a story we did last year sometime. Peeps had a collaboration with Pepsi that resulted in a drink that was offensively not called Peepsy. That didn't taste good, but it was an idea.
Is it for real?
Oh, yes. What I like about this is, Coke is really looking at Pepsi as a competitor and saying, like, what you can do, we can do better. So they're doing a bi-directional collaboration in which we have none other than Oreo-flavored Coca-Cola and Coca-Cola-flavored Oreo. And I have brought both in today for us to try and see which one is worse. I'm going to be honest. I think that's the result. I'm going to pass a can over to you.
Okay, great.
On the side, it says Besties Forever with ever crossed out and a limited time in its place. So even they don't have real aspirations that this is going to last. But yeah, let's start with the Coca-Cola Zero. Oh yeah, let's get some. Ooh.
I'm ready.
Yeah. All right. 3, 2, 1.
You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of a Necco wafer. It tastes a little like a chocolate Necco wafer.
That's so interesting because it tastes like just Coca-Cola to me.
No.
I'm getting no notes of Oreo at all.
There's definitely an Oreo overlaid on top of the Coca-Cola.
Oh, yeah. Okay. It's like in the aftertaste. That's interesting.
I'm gonna bring most of this home for my 12-year-old. She would love this. I'm not even kidding. It makes me sad
I didn't get the 6-pack.
And she doesn't do sugar, so she's like sugar-free person.
Oh, yeah. You know what? I wonder if mine was not properly mixed, which is itself a horrifying thought.
No, there's no such. This is commercial. There's no mixing of a soda. That's not a thing, Sean. I'm sorry to tell you.
It's like natural peanut butter. It
separates. I do like the can design.
The can is interesting.
It's like this surreal, stack of Oreos with one pulled out.
Yeah.
It's high contrast black and white with one strange
sort of
Coca-Cola square that just says creations on it. And then that weird Besties for a limited time, which is a really weird tagline.
My brain had just skipped over whatever that creations logo is.
I want to scan here to enter Bestie mode. So there's a QR code that takes us somewhere for to enhance the experience.
See, you're exploring all the real estate of this can.
I love novelty. Are you kidding me? OK Soda was right up my alley. I called that line so many times.
For the younger listeners, do you want to describe what the hell OK Soda was?
Oh yeah. OK Soda was an amazing, I think it was by Coca-Cola.
I think it was a Coca-Cola.
So OK Soda was a limited edition Gen X, sort of capitalizing on the alternative grunge underground visual scene.
Yeah.
It had illustrations by Daniel Klaus from 8-Ball and Charles Burns, I think was the other illustrator that did the can illustration. And there was a phone number where you could call and get weird messages on a loop. It was kind of like the age of irreverence.
Yeah, very much so.
The age of like this experimentation around culture, but then also corporate culture wanting to use that to try to sell new and novel things to a new audience.
So sort of inherently a broken idea just at its core.
No, it's a great idea. Are you kidding me? Well, and for those of us that only had malls and grocery stores and mini marts and Rolling Stone magazine down at the Safeway, like that's how culture got to small towns.
Oh, yeah.
Was through these things where it was just like, oh, this is weird. I like weird. I'm weird too.
It looked so alien too. Like those illustrations, I don't think we can undersell enough how they looked. They were all just sad older men.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
OK,
I think
it's
that
just
was like the kind of the archetype of that era was like this kind of misanthropic male and angst-ridden teenage girls. I think that's why the mashup of Ghost World was a thing.
Yes,
you know what I mean? Where it's like
100%.
You've got the Enid character, but then you also have the Steve Buscemi character. It's like in this inappropriate kind of tension. Age-inappropriate tension. But anyway, back to this surprise theme of the podcast today, which is the Oreo limited edition Coca-Cola Zero Sugar soda. And now we have the cookie.
Yeah, so we should get to the cookie. So the cookie, I bought these at Winco, the place where all brand experiences go to die. It's basically the last step of grocery store before these things go straight into a dumpster. So I have to think that they made these and were just like, oh no, because I've only ever seen them at Winco. But I bought these together as soon as I saw them. And the Winco checkout person took one look at the cookies and said, oh God. And I was like, why? Because that's the one I would think would be the better one. She was like, oh, because it's got Pop Rocks in it.
Oh my God, it's a trio.
Yeah, Oreo Coca-Cola with popping candy. Does this have?
Wow,
it does have.
This is definitely going to be an explosion of something.
An explosion of a smell that will awaken all the rats.
This is a podcast about creativity, and it has invention written all over it. This looks disgusting. No, it looks really cool. It's got Coca-Cola cans on one side and the traditional almost black Oreo cookie on the other side.
Yeah, and the Coca-Cola cookie is a red cookie too.
So for those at home, there is a filling that seems to have flecks of Pop Rocks in it.
Yeah, it has a definite smell that's very Coca-Cola-y.
You're making a face, but in my mind, I'm thinking this isn't the worst.
It's not the worst. I'm trying to place what it is because it's also the smell is so Coca-Cola-y. Like that Coca-Cola cookie smells like a Coca-Cola.
That it does.
I don't really get any Oreo smell off of this, but I'm like, does Oreo really have that distinctive smell?
No.
No, not really. Maybe that's my problem with the beverage component of this. The taste is not there, and it's not even like the popping is not even what I've experienced with other Oreos that have popping candy in them. So I'm very confused.
I think that the connection that I'm drawing is what a thing that we all need is that quest for novelty. And corporations need that more than anyone because they're in the job of extracting value. Mm-hmm. And you can't just have the same thing over and over again when you know that human beings want novelty.
Yes.
So it's like, how can we capitalize on Coca-Cola fans with these Oreos? And how can we capitalize on Oreo fans with the Coca-Cola? We just have to try some things to see if we can keep moving units. So I appreciate the attempt.
Yeah. I'm curious which one that you would rather experience again. Which one is most successful? Which one is least successful to you?
I think the soda has the most unique and novel flavor.
I'm wondering if I'm going to appreciate the soda more than that now that I've had the cookie.
The other thing is, as a non-soda drinker, but with a tween, I have a tween at home named Lucy. She's obsessed with soda.
Yeah.
Like she just really wants soda and she wants there to be refills and she wants the soda to be large. And she's very upset yesterday when we went through Burgerville. And I was like, no, you're getting the small that comes with the kids' meal. I'm not getting you a large soda. And so.
You don't want her to be super wired?
So I've come to appreciate just the role that soda plays in the development of a teenager.
Yeah.
To like try to explore caffeine and sugar and all in one place.
Just a magical experience when...
I like the soda better.
I'm kind of in soda is better too, which is so unexpected because I really was fully expecting soda to be, I don't want to say rancid, but maybe near to that. And I realized I'm the one who elected to do this, which makes that seem all the more cruel to inflict on you as my guest.
Well, that's so nice of you to not have prepared me for this. I like the element of surprise.
Yeah, that's what we do here. But yeah, it's the cookie is just, it's not, as a smell experience, it's really interesting. As a taste experience, it's not even Oreo level.
And that's often the case, I feel like, with novelty foods.
Yeah.
There's the odor brings you the flavor, but then the actual flavor isn't quite there. The other thing about the Coca-Cola is it's not as sweet. Of course, this is zero sugar, but it like tastes a little better.
I think you're right.
Full on sugar. I ate that whole cookie.
You did? Do you want another?
No, I don't. I definitely do not.
Are you sure? Because I have like 40 of them.
I'm sure your students will love those.
God, you know what? That is the solve. So yeah, I mean, I think this is an interesting place to be with this. And I don't know what I've learned vis-a-vis my experiment with Five Guys from this. I really hope Five Guys sees this and they're like, wow. I mean, I'm not going to try the Five Guys food because, again, I cannot eat it. They do not serve anything that I am able to eat at their restaurant. But maybe
Is that what this is all about, really, Sean? That seems to be a point that you're wanting to make to them.
I want to be clear to them that if there is a collaboration that will happen, it cannot be around their food. Because it does seem like...
No, it's about an exchange of cold, hard cash.
Exactly.
And that you will change the way that you talk about them if they will either give you cold, hard cash or transform their menu to be more inclusive to your dietary needs.
Or make the restaurants feel less like abandoned bus stations, you know.
These things intrigue me. I want to check out the decor here.
Get ready to spend a lot of money because Five Guys burgers are very expensive for some reason.
I don't know where Five Guys even is.
I think you have to go to the deep suburbs in order to experience the Five Guys. Do
you want someone to let them know, hey, you should know there's a podcast that's talking a lot about you? Because that is the way that people find out about things. People like to be talked about.
People do like to be talked about. I'm curious. It does seem like it would maybe be better for them to discover it. You know, again, the Rachel Lee Cook thing they should notice me all of a sudden and be like, whoa, who's that? That person that I've seen all the time.
I wish you a lot of luck in that. Godspeed.
Again, a hugely
You're doing the Lord's
successful...
work with this Five Guys courtship.
Again, I only model healthy relationships on this show.
Yeah, well, I feel like that we could spend the show talking about this quest, and I could do some armchair therapy with you.
Yeah, I could. This is maybe suggestive that I need a new show that's just about this kind of stupid thing.
I think you have anxious attachment with Five Guys.
or maybe just generally, if we're being totally honest, maybe that is manifesting from other parts of my psyche.
Yes. Well, we always have to project onto something to learn something. So you're doing a good projection.
But Jen, I don't think we came here necessarily to talk about Five Guys and my let's say bad attachment styles that are starting to bleed into other parts of my life.
I don't think the judgment is useful.
You know what? That's fair. Okay. I appreciate that. We came here to talk about kind of what your journey has been in design. And we were talking before the recording. You started very early in making stuff. You were starting really like at the very beginning of your high school experience as a zine maker.
That's true. I my first zine was called Amoebicus. And when Barbie came out, actually, I pulled it out to remember just how much I had a dislike and disdain for Barbie because I wore a burned out Barbie around my neck.
Oh, really?
And then there's photos of me with Barbie parts hanging out of my mouth in photocopy form in the zine. So there's a lot of Barbie related sort of feminist screeds.
Yeah.
Which I'm very proud of right now. It's like full circle.
Yeah.
Barbie's sort of in the cultural lexicon, and I cared about Barbie before all of that.
The cover of the zine that you're holding right now is the burned out Barbie, and it's such an extreme close up. Like that camera has to be like a centimeter away from that Barbie's face in order to get that level of close up.
It was just keep putting that photocopier 200%, make it bigger and bigger, baby.
So yeah, the library photocopier just the person running the library level is just like looking over and being like, I don't know what's going on over there. Don't worry about that. But yeah, so like early feminist like essays is what is going on in this.
Essays. I did a zine every year of my life through my years of high school, 15, 16, 17, 18. I did one each year.
Wow.
And my first one was called Amoebicus. I did teas for several years. I did it for 4 years. Yeah, it was feminist essays. It was essays from my friends. It was, a lot of music reviews from friends of mine. My now husband even wrote some music reviews. It was like music reviews with that guy, Greg from Yakima was what it was called. There were
so dismissive.
Serious topics covered. I have friends talked about being queer, about being sexually abused. I had friends talk about leg hair and penis envy. I mean, It really was meant to be a transgressive, playful playground of ideas.
Yeah.
For all the ideas that I could not explore while I was at home. My parents at that time were fairly evangelical and very much not interested in me exploring what I would call secular culture, or what we used to call secular culture. So anything non-Christian, really.
Well, that was the other thing. Like, did they know that this was happening?
They did not know this was happening.
Wow.
And there were little scraps of paper they might find that made them suspicious. And so I got a file cabinet that had a key, and I kept everything in that file cabinet, and I got all my mail through a post office box so that I could intercept it before it would come to them.
I am just imagining your dad picking up a newspaper to read it, and then there's just huge cutouts out of the newspaper.
I was actually in a newspaper once about zines, but I wouldn't let my friend who was writing the article use my name. And so it said Betty, who's not her real name. Her name wishes not to be used. And there's photos of me with zines everywhere. My parents actually found it. And I pretended that I was only standing in for someone else.
Yes.
And so, I mean, the lengths I went to pretend that I wasn't a punk rock teenager was very high. And I was super lucky to have a whole community and to be able to meet people through my zine. I sometimes had them at like skate shops or like some of the indie record store places around Sumner, Tacoma, Puyallup, Washington. And people wrote me letters that became really good friends of mine.
That's so interesting. So like, how did you become like immersed in zine culture enough to be making your own zines at that age? Like
the gateway drug called Sassy magazine.
Of course.
I was very lucky to have just found, before Sassy magazine, even there was something called, I was part of the NXS fan club, and there were these things called slam books. And you would write on one tiny scrap of paper all the things you were into, and you would send it to someone else. And whoever started it, it would come back to them. And then you would have this whole group of people that you could assess their interests and see who you wanted to be pen pals with.
Wow. So like, essentially, like you're like this is like classified ads, but for friendships.
Exactly.
Remotely.
It was magical because you never knew what was going to come in the mail. What little transmission of culture and creativity and self-expression and, all of those things mashed together at a time where I didn't have the internet. There wasn't phones.
No.
You can't just access other people very easily. So the fact that you could have this communication that then was also innately so creative and unique and novel, everybody's page of a slam book would be different. And so then that naturally moved to zines where it was like, I'm interested in all this content. I wasn't necessarily, in fact, you can read one of these and you can tell I was not like the best teenage writer.
Wow.
The interview that I did with Fugazi is one of the most humiliating sets of words that I've ever
You
put
did
down
an interview
on paper.
with Fugazi, though?
That was my luckiest thing that ever happened.
Holy
and I
hell.
give props to my now husband for setting that interview up. We were pen pals, so we didn't live in the same town. It was amazing. It was super cool. And because of that, I was in Maximum Rock and Roll, which was a big kind of giant, thick newsprint zine that meant a lot to me at the time because it had a big section of zine reviews. I also did a lot of music reviews, scene reports, really cool. All the, big punk things would be in there.
Yeah.
And so if you're interested in that culture, to be able to every month get a giant, thick newsprint thing that was just about every facet of that culture. Some of it was gross, some of it was immature, some of it was sublime and smart and interesting and critical.
Yeah, it's the only way, too, that this stuff is getting out to a wider audience. It's still an audience that is like interested in this subculture, but like that's the link. That's the center of the kind of spider web connecting all these things.
Yep.
That's so fascinating.
I feel very lucky. And once I left high school, to be honest, I sort of, in a way, dropped doing them because I became more focused in survival, I think, just like making a living and making a life for myself. But one of the big catalysts from zines was I went to a zine convention in 1994, the Center of Contemporary Art in Seattle. I think it's called COCA, Seattle. They put together a zine convention. And some of the people that were there were Chloe from Reading Frenzy, and Sean Schumacher was there running her booth.
Wow.
She did a panel with Dan from 10 Things Zine and a few other zines I don't remember, but those were some of the big ones that were going on there. Was like 10 Things was a really popular zine in Seattle, Washington at the time. And then I met Sean, who I wrote him, he had Crap Hounds there. It was like the first issue of Crap Hound, and I was obsessed and just in love with the zine.
Yeah.
So I wrote him a letter, and he wrote me back, and we became pen pals, and he became my mentor.
That's wild.
But he was a graphic designer, and that's when I knew, I think this is the thing I want to do.
Yeah. Crap Hound, for anyone who doesn't know, Crap Hound is like in a way, it's the thing that enabled clip art to be distributed very easily for zines, and it's kind of like a very pivotal publication for zine culture. But yeah, Sean would put together these Crap Hound issues that are just like a collection of weird imagery from long dead clip art sources of like the 50s and 60s and 70s that, it's like no one cares about where any of this came from.
It was amazing. He would have old phone books from the 70s in just stacks, and he would go through them and trim things out and put them in folders.
Yeah.
And he had photocopiers in the places he lived. He usually lived in places that were like warehousey offices. And we would make photocopies, and he would allow me to photocopy anything I wanted to. Wow. I was super lucky to have him as a mentor. And I didn't live in Portland at the time. And in fact, for most of college, I didn't even work in design. I worked in healthcare. And so it was like a dream that seemed very far away to maybe one day work in the creative field.
Yeah.
And he would send me all the software. He was incredibly generous, and he also did not suffer fools. And so I think that it sort of pushed me to a certain level of ambition that I maybe wouldn't have had otherwise. And so very, very, very lucky to have tripped upon something that would also have a community attached to it and people that actually cared.
Yeah, and be this thing that later on in your story you get to come back to and really have those relationships blossom into this other thing. So, and this convention is happening like basically right at the end of your high school, right?
That's right.
So then you end up going off to college.
I went to college. Hey, Mom and Dad, guess what? I'm going to be a printmaking major.
And that must have come as even more of a surprise, considering they had no idea of the whole the 4 years of zine making.
I'll tell you, they didn't even want me to go
scale.
to college. And of all colleges, the Evergreen State College was the last place they wanted me to go. But that's exactly why I wanted to go there.
The secret's out, Mom and Dad.
I mean, it was such a great, critical thinking school.
Yeah.
Critical theory was sort of part of everything. I did political science. I did economics. I did Russian history and Russian studies. I became obsessed with the Russian constructivists and all of that, like Situationist International and all that sort of European Bauhaus design systems was super exciting to me. But I ended up landing in the art program and realizing that graphics was something I was really interested in. I never took one graphic design class, but Sean encouraged me. He really was good at telling me exactly what to do. He's like, this is the kind of computer you should buy. So I worked really hard, and I saved up a year's worth of as much financial aid as I could, and I spent it on one of the big towers.
Oh, wow.
Which now is like the largest paperweight ever. Because
we didn't know that at the time.
We have some at our office, and it's like, why do we still have this? I think it's supposed to be recycled responsibly. Buying that computer is one of the best things that ever happened to me. Because there was a point where I was like, do I go into nursing because I see that there's income in that? Or do I work a job in this field I care about? So I worked for an office supply place, Office Max, in the copy department.
Oh, wow.
And then from there, I worked for a family-run Minuteman Press where the entire crew and family were Mormon. They were so good to me. They were so incredibly kind. And I got to lay out everything that came through. Wow. It was like my job for my last year of college. And because I had that kind of production experience, when the Stranger started a new newspaper called The Mercury, Sean was the first art director. And he was like, okay, so production? You don't have a portfolio. Whatever, I don't care. Why don't you come and work for me? And I think this is, if you want to work in this field, I think you should come and work for me.
So that's so fast. So The Stranger, Seattle's big weekly, is coming to Portland. And because you have this relationship with Sean, you're able to like take that experience you got at these small like presses essentially. And
it was my first big break.
Yeah, like that's huge.
It was totally huge. And then the second big break that happened was he quit. And they didn't have anyone else to be the art director.
How long did it take him to...
6 months.
Wow.
Hardly any amount of time. I was 24 years old. I mean, and he was a tough mentor. You know, he really, you know, when I think about some of the mistakes, because some of the theme of this is mistakes, and Oreo Coca-Cola Zero Sugar.
Yeah, I've still been drinking mine too. I'm kind of coming around to it more and more.
I'm actually the opposite. I'm actually
you're
moving away from
interesting.
It seemed more delicious when I started.
I think my addictive qualities around sugar and maybe your, let's say, safer reticence around sugar, I think are starting to manifest.
I think that they call it, you know, white death or something. Maybe that's cocaine. Anyway, so...
We don't know what's in this drink. It could be.
I'm just looking at the wall where you have a record of 50 favorite waltzes by a band called the Mom and Dads. And it's fantastic. Sorry.
No, the Moms and Dads, I believe this was a record that was gifted to me by my teaching partner, Kate Bingham-Burt.
It's a great
At
gift.
her garage sale. Yes, the Moms and Dads. They're definitely moms and dads. There's no doubt about that.
There's
looking at
only
them.
one mom, and it makes it weird.
Yeah, that is true.
Because it's the mom and dads. It's not the moms and dads. It's only one mom and 3 men.
Yeah, and you know, families come in all forms.
That's
and
true.
They're just a quintuple. Yeah, you know, that's what they do to make their polka music. The polka music is their child.
I think it's waltzes.
Damn it. Well, it should be polka music.
Okay,
Get it together, moms and dads.
So I'm thinking about the Mercury. This was super fun to think about, like, mistakes, because the one mistake of all of my career that came to the forefront with this was I had just become the art director of the Portland Mercury, and I was responsible for the press check. And I went to the press check. It's all, you know, mostly men, older than me. You know, I'm kind of this, like, see myself as a scrappy punk art director who's, you know, 22. I hardly know what I'm doing. And I pour over every page. The other thing to note is that back then we would submit boards. So we would wax our ads. And this was 2000.
Wow.
It didn't take long for everything to become digital, and PDFs were what we sent.
Yeah.
But the first year of the Mercury, it was, we're using a waxer. We're sending it and pasting it onto giant boards.
Yeah, like for those, like sometimes, you know, if you're a student who's new to design and you read about like photo ready art, like I think that's usually what that's referred to. That I did not realize that was happening that late, though.
I don't think it was supposed to. So I'm not sure what was going on. And the Mercury had some kind of contract around paper prices, where if paper prices went down, our prices were supposed to go down, and this printer wasn't adjusting the prices based on our contract.
Oh.
And so what they had me do was they had me go back to paste up, where they would have to do like Ruby Lith versions. I mean, extremely arduous, tedious, time consuming in order to get them to, you know, adjust our rates.
Considering that this is a news weekly, that's real wild.
It was very time consuming. So I had one of my first press checks. I'm looking through the paper. I'm pouring through everything that's editorial. I'm just spending so much time. I'm feeling really good about myself. I feel like I have to do that thing where you act as if I know what I'm doing, you know, where I have some sense of authority to be there, which I've felt many times in my career, but this was one of the first big ones.
Yeah.
And then I felt really good about myself. I looked at all that editorial and I walked out of there and I was like, I nailed it. And then the next day, my publisher pulls me into the office and says, Jen, did you notice this ad that was missing? And in giant block lettering, it says FPO ad TK.
Oh, no.
Which is like a whole mashup of, you know, shorthand for the ad is supposed to be here and it's not yet. Somebody didn't paste it in. And it was one of the first lessons. There were sort of 2 things I learned there. One is don't do that. My job as the art director for a press check was not just to focus on my own stuff. It's to focus on the whole paper.
Yeah.
And the whole point of a paper is to sell ads.
Yeah, that's sort of the whole business.
Yeah, that's what it's supposed to
Especially when it's free and that's the only revenue source.
Exactly. The other thing that happened is both the editor and the publisher were like, mistakes happen, no big deal. We have another one coming around the corner. There's another one next week. It's not that big a deal. So just their generosity of spirit in that moment really like created a safe space. The publisher for The Stranger, even when I did a training there, said, make mistakes, have fun, just try stuff.
Hey, but that's like such a, in terms of an environment where that can really be true, is like, you couldn't find a better one, because it truly, like, what you do from week to week is just going to disappear. It has to be iterative, because you're constantly building the next one and the one after that and the one after that.
You know, I actually was thinking about this earlier today when I was preparing for this, where it's like everything we do in design so quickly becomes obsolete.
Truly.
So you have to enjoy the process and learn from the process, because nothing really lasts. All this ephemera that's behind me that I brought that people can't see, but there's a whole bunch of it. It's like the Wayback Machine of the internet, but my Wayback Machine is these scraps of paper and all these publications I've done. None of it has any relevance to anybody but me at this point. And just realizing that can give you that sense of experimentation and play if you cannot take it quite so seriously. So,
well, there's also like, because it's print too, there is, and like, this is something I've thought about with some of the print projects I've done. Like, there are only so many of those, and there will only ever be so many of those. And once they're gone, they're really gone. Like, you will never, like, you could maybe do a reprint, but like, you'll never get the same paper again. You'll never get the same like weird magic that went into the press.
I don't like what you're saying, because it makes me feel like I need to hold on to everything I have. And there's just like, all this, nostalgia and all of these things. But
I think you can tell from looking around the studio that I am certainly pro-hoarder rather than anti-hoarder. With my basically every piece of print media that has ever come out of our program.
Keep everything all the time,
reach.
forever. Make someone else deal with it later.
Yeah, try not to think about how much paper is in this room. It's a little horrifying. But yeah, so you were able to get through that ad sort of mistake pretty well then. Like,
oh no, I felt humiliated for a long time, but that was my own shame.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, my windshield wiper was so blurry with shame.
Yeah.
That's my visual metaphor I like to use for shame now. It's like, it's a windshield wiper that's really like, you can't see reality clearly.
A little bit of a Portland winter one where some leaves have fallen on it, and now it's just all weird gunk. And greasy. And
it's turning dark, and it's just muck. No, I mean, honestly, there was such a sense of play there. I don't think that I was prepared for some of the next chapters of my design career, because that one was so experimental and generous. The editor there, William Stephen Humphrey, he really embodied this, like, he really was the cool uncle for the whole team. He had boundaries, but he allowed us to do a lot of wacky stuff and fun stuff. I made fake ads about thumb war and how it's safe, effective, and fun. I could make it. We
should talk about those, because you brought in some of your ads. These are just placeholder ads for when the ad space didn't get sold.
Exactly.
And there are the thumb war one is great.
Thank you.
I love the one for clothes. You're wearing them. I mean, it's accurate. So, like, where did those come from? Like, what is the, like...
I really have to credit the fact that Sean left me such a legacy of clip art. My life, my cabinet I have a cabinet full of clip art. I actually gave a huge amount to Kate for outlet. But because of that, it was like, well, we need material. And so the visual material was normally the thing that would spin off the fake ad for. There was also that section called Grab Bag.
Oh, yes.
Where it was like, I wish I could remember some of the best ones. We did a whole series based on my friend's son's like 5th grade photo, where we called him Jerry Masterson, and he was like a swearing asshole of a child. And so he had a column where every single year the column would get updated with his updated school photo. It was amazing.
Would he like tell you that he'd heard about people reading the Jerry Masterson column? And...
actually, his dad, the Stranger started running them because they were so popular also. They lived in Seattle.
Wow.
And somebody saw the kid, was like, it's Jerry Masterson. And that kid's name is not Jerry Masterson. And the dad was like, you're not doing this anymore. This is too weird.
So, yeah, he eventually got the same experience you had with, sort of your zine making persona being revealed to the world.
Only I don't think that he actually knew that we were using his photo for that. He does now. He's an adult. He loves it. But it was so fun. I think you need a Kleenex by Joaquin Phoenix. They're so amazing and ridiculous. Yeah. So such a place of play and permission. We don't necessarily as designers always have an environment in which there's high permission to create humor and nonsense with graphics. So that, I think that later on, I think I'm always trying to get back to that because it's harder once you're working with more serious clients to have that be something that you have access to.
Oh, absolutely. Well, the other thing that makes me think of is like, this is not just a transition point in terms of you like starting in this big role, this very prominent role very suddenly, but like right at the start of this, you're leaving Evergreen in Olympia, Washington, a pretty small town, and going to Portland where there's this huge culture of zine making and creativity. And like, what is that also influencing on this too?
So fun. I think the main place that it influenced my practice was the fact that every issue had a different cover.
Yeah.
And that we didn't commission a lot of, let's just say we didn't pay a lot for covers. And so usually what we're using is existing work.
Yeah.
Photography from Alicia Rose or paintings from Carson Ellis just wrote about, her recent book that she did and then showed a Mercury. It was like, I was on the cover of the Mercury. And guess what? I was in the cover of the Mercury 22 years ago. And I was like, I remember that cover because I was the art director back then. But just that fact that I could go to a show at Compound and be like, I love this one, and then have a conversation with the gallery owner, and then it's like, okay, no problem. You pay the artist.
Wow.
And that's how we would work it out. I had a Shepard Fairey cover that went really well. There was a bunch of big notable names that I was able to work with just through their agents for a very nominal amount of funds. And so that was part of the creative spirit of Portland for me then. Of course, having friends that were in the creative field also. And a lot of people moved from Olympia to Portland, which was super fun and exciting. And it just felt like this place in which there was a lot of possibility and a lot of things going on. I haven't always been as tapped into that by the nature of the flows of my life, but I do remember that time as being very vibrant, whether it's music or art shows or design events, just very active.
And it's the manifestation of who you wanted to be as a teenager making these zines. Mm-hmm. Now you're literally putting out a zine every week in the form of a larger press.
I like that.
I'm trying to draw a circle. You know me.
Totally.
Constantly drawing circles.
Bring it back
around. So yeah, like what else is going on at the Mercury at this time? Like how do you like start to, I guess, grow into this role and then like, move through it?
It's all such a blur. It's like, there was a lot of drinking. I feel like that was such a part of, it was such a social culture. I also remember the Mercury putting on events where it was like, hey, Jen, do you want to arm wrestle another person on stage? And it was like, sure. You know what I mean? Yeah. We were involved in a lot of really fun and unexpected things.
Normal art director responsibilities.
And then, of course, now I'm remembering some of the things that the Mercury might consider things that they wouldn't do now. I'm not going to call them a mistake, but where they would auction off all the Mercury women.
Oh, no.
As part of their gift guide where people would have to pay. And then you would go on a date with literally every woman that works there. Yeah, they don't do that anymore.
It seems quite problematic, in fact.
Fallen out of favor. All of the stories I had to lay out of like, look, it's an employee drunk Olympics where we write an article about what happened when 3 of our employees got really drunk.
Wow.
So anyway, but there were also really incredible, beautiful pieces, great news writers, lots of music. One of my favorite projects that I'm remembering is when Benicio del Toro came to town for the movie The Hunted. And so we have this, Sean was living in LA at the time, but he made the cover for us. And he's, a Photoshop clip art master. But he took this beautiful religious painting of angels looking up towards a central figure, but the central figure is Benicio del Toro. And then for every single photo in the whole issue, whether it was a news photo, a music photo, a film photo, things we get as press photos, I photoshopped, me or Ezra Cariff, photoshopped Benicio del Toro's face into every photo in the entire issue of the paper.
He's just angelically omnipresent in all these.
Sometimes he'd be in the clouds where you could barely see him in like a news story, or he'd be like, overlaid on a cracker as part of the food photo. It was so fun. It was it was great. That was the best creative experimentation with Photoshop I've been able to have.
Well, it's very rare that you get to sort of anoint Benicio del Toro.
He saw it too. We knew that. So we were very excited. He liked it. We think he liked it.
What? That's wild. Maybe this is also me thinking of the Five Guys actually seeing.
That is a good full circle. It's like, what pathological obsessive thing must you do to get the attention of someone?
Yes, but also like you kind of don't necessarily want them to see it because it feels like that. I don't know. Maybe
you want them to see it.
Yeah, maybe I do.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe I secretly do.
Yeah, if you're going to put that much effort into something as an homage to someone, they better notice it. Even if they hate it, that would be fine.
Yeah. So you're getting into this job. Like, how long do you stay at the Mercury?
I stayed there for 5 years. I think that I was getting itchy. I think that it was really hard to learn the ropes those first year or two, and then it became a bit more rote. And not to say that it was wonderful. There were so many great pieces. I learned so much about the city. Plus, I moved there for that job. So there couldn't be a better way to learn about a city than to have to hire artists to do things for it and to bring stories to life about it.
Yeah. You get reports about the city delivered directly to your desk every single week.
Yes. Hopefully on time.
Probably not,
depending on who the managing editor was. I won't name names. But so what happened was, I also was able to hire a lot of people. So that was also a really rich form of, building community too, was being able to pay people. It wasn't a ton at that time, of course. Unfortunately, I don't think what they pay for things has changed a ton.
I don't know. The print industry has never seemed healthier to me. Seems great.
The Mercury is really diversified. I will give them that. They've done so many cool things to keep with ticketing and, hump. So there were other things that I designed for them too after the fact. But with the Mercury, I was there for 5 years. I ended up getting itchy. I just wanted to leave Portland, quite honestly. So I applied for some schools, just two. One was I met these two guys. What were they? What are they called? Poster.
Two guys, I think, is too few guys.
No, five guys is right.
That's the right number of guys.
So I went to a poster show that was all about rock posters. It was in Seattle, and I met these two guys that had been to Tyler School of Art that's part of Temple University.
Yeah.
And it's a big school, and they were like, this is a great place to go. It's just an incredible school. I had an old roommate that lived in Philadelphia, and I applied, and I got a full assistantship.
Wow.
So I had to work for the school in the publication office because I had publication experience. And I moved to Philadelphia for 2 years to go to grad school. I think I was nervous or felt like a little antsy that I had never had any formal training in design and that everything I had done was very ad hoc. There wasn't a lot of oversight in the Mercury. So I was the art director. So whatever I did went. And there was really not a lot of pushback, which is a wonderful thing, but there wasn't a lot of necessarily I kind of felt like I had reached the conclusion to my time there. And that's why when I went to grad school, it was like a rude awakening. There were so many design industry insidery things I had no idea about. There were so many ways I didn't know how to create. I didn't know how to illustrate. I didn't know how to do motion. I needed to learn Flash. The agency culture was something that I learned about through there. Yeah. And I really hadn't had a lot of exposure to that. I mean, they were starting to mention all these design luminaries that I had never even heard of. Chip Kidd, James Victori, Paula Scher is the darling of Tyler School of Art. She went there. And so it was just like my mind was sort of blown with all of this work that was talked about in this really serious and academic way. And I kind of had a hard time taking things very seriously in the beginning. And I remember the thing that they often said about me was like, you're so West Coast.
Really?
And I had a really different experience with authority there because I wasn't used to it. Even from the Evergreen State College or my job, there wasn't a seriousness or a gravity. And then it just seemed like I was in a new world. I also knew Jessica Hish then. She was an undergrad. She was a senior.
Oh, yeah, because she's a Tyler person too.
She's like the Tyler person
who
would, many kids would pull all-nighters there, and I had never experienced a culture of that level of rigor. And Jessica was someone that would pull several all-nighters.
Oh, no.
She just was such a hard worker. I mean, she's, her body of work is evidence to what a industrious and resilient kind of designer she is.
Yeah.
But I just remember being around all these talented undergrads, really fantastic professors, Kelly Holohan, Joe Scorsone. Both of them like had this drive and enthusiasm and warmth in the way that they created culture at that school that ended up, I just sort of fell in love with being there. But I couldn't wait to go back to Portland afterwards.
Well, it's an interesting thing to think about, too. Like, I mean, you, up until this point, have only had very anti-authoritarian systems. Maybe that's not the right word, but like very, very kind of flat hierarchies, essentially, around you. And you're going into Philadelphia and feeling structure for the first time.
And grades for the first time. I'd never had grades.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It was great. I was like, I will be having that A, please.
As opposed to the, sticker of a smiley face that they give you, whatever.
No. It's not a sticker. It's a packet of papers that's like 2 inches thick that you have to send off to an admissions people. And then they're like, but what's the grade?
Wait, so they're just giving you verbose grades?
No, you do. There's a faculty evaluation and then you do a self-evaluation. So half of my, what's that face?
That seems like that's a very complicated system.
It's a lot of words.
Yeah.
It's a narrative process where it's more evaluative. You have to take your time to work through it.
Oh, so it's a little bit more qualitative, which is maybe a good thing. Maybe.
I think so.
Maybe that's.
You learn something by writing about yourself.
Yeah.
And it was unconventional. So I was excited to have a grade, but only because I got 1 A- and I didn't get a 4.0, and I'm still pissed.
That's painful though. Because
the biggest paper I did was an A. Well, you tell me.
Yeah.
You do 2 papers for one thesis class. It was like an art history class, and I was all in for Jenny Holzer, that artist Jenny Holzer. She's so great.
Yeah.
I had one smaller paper that was an A-, one bigger paper that was an A. That should average to an A.
Seems like it should, yes.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm gonna have it rescinded. I'm gonna ask them to revise my grade, which no one cares about.
No.
So that was the Mercury, and then grad school, and then I worked for Portland Monthly.
Yeah, so you're coming back to Portland, to a community that you know really, really well, and you step into a role at Portland Monthly. Like, how does that happen? Like.
They were starting up a new publication. So again, there was a startup vibe there. It was Randy Gregg was the editor. Jason Blackheart was the art director. And they were doing a magazine called Portland Spaces. It was like an architecture, kind of like city planning, design. There was a section in the back that was kind of like ready-made magazine that we called Handbook. And so that was the section that I was in charge of. But it was an absolutely beautiful magazine in which the seriousness and the level of quality was much higher than I had ever experienced. And so that for me was the biggest adjustment and struggle. There was a level of rigor there of the design that I was not accustomed to. And so, like any design career and project, there's kind of a hero's journey. And there's a point in which you're sort of in the abyss. And I really struggled silently there for quite some time. Like I felt I really, the amount of revisions on things and the amount of like hard work that went into it was a little bit more than I had ever had before.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about. Like, I mean, your work at the Mercury is just, it has to be iterative and it has to be a little relentless. And
it has to be just good enough.
Yeah. And like in having to now dwell on the details, like, you start to get stymied. Like, I think that's something that I've definitely experienced in like, because my career is so much more production-y than like than it is like actually getting to sit down and spend the time. And like doing that kind of work now kind of bums me out. I would much rather be like, churn this out really fast and, then move on. So that, I can see why that would be like kind of a bummer. Like,
yeah, I don't know if it was like a bummer because it was very exciting and fun. And Jason was a really incredible art director.
Oh, yeah.
He's just super talented, really high bar for quality, super hard worker. And it was the two of us in one little room. And the gift of that time was really Jason's honest and direct mentorship. And the pain for me was honest and direct mentorship. You know what I mean? It's sort of like the two are wrapped in the same. Just in that, like, when I really look at other mistakes that I've made, it's really like this mistake of thinking, of taking things so personally and then not expressing that.
Yeah.
So it's just like sort of the suffering of feeling like you're never quite doing well enough. And that wasn't the case. I learned so much there. But I just remember, it being it feeling more challenging. I remember the environment feeling a little less playful and welcoming and convivial as a social space too. I have really good friends there that were from that time, and there's so many brilliant people that passed through Portland Monthly in particular. But overall, it was like a great body of work. I learned so much, and towards the end of that, publications really went through, of course, have continued to go through a decline. And so that magazine became, a quarterly and then a twice a year. And then it was embedded as part of Portland Monthly. And then they finally got rid of it. So that sort of was the end of that chapter. I hung on there for a while. They were very generous in like finding a marketing position for me. And it wasn't quite what I wanted to be doing. And so when I started looking around elsewhere, around that time, Jason and I took a freelance project together that ended up being a project for the city of Portland and for RAC, Regional Arts and Culture Council. And that project allowed me to leave Portland Monthly because it was just a project that got us a lot of attention. It was really successful. I would say he was really the heavy lifter of that design, but I sort of rode the coattails of that. And because of that, I was able to get more work with RAC. And once I got more freelance work, I decided to go solo.
Well, yeah. And that's such an interesting thing to think about. Like, it's a lot of times the hard part is getting your foot in the door for that kind of work. And like now all of a sudden that work with RAC opens up this whole like nonprofit like landscape to you.
Yep.
This huge essentially economy in Portland around nonprofit work that now you can start to set out on your own. Is that sort of where Fort Wick comes into the picture? Like,
It's where it started as Jen Wick Studio.
Oh, really?
Yes. That was like my first iteration. But yes, that's the beginning of like a 10-year, like almost to the day. It was exactly 10 years.
Wow.
That I ran Fort Wick and I worked for myself. Most of my clients, almost. I had a lot of clients that didn't even necessarily make it into my portfolio, but because you have to take everything when you're running a studio and wanting to get those numbers going, get that spreadsheet solid.
Yeah, you're doing all the ad sales for this one.
I'll do anything.
Yeah.
But I did mostly, the nonprofit work really was my bread and butter. Working for the like school of the like doing the opera and performances for PSU. I did a lot of that work. Oregon Humanities was just a phenomenal client. I was the art director for that magazine. I sort of became the publication person and a nonprofit person in Portland, and so opportunities often came my way. I still reflect on how truly privileged and lucky I was to do work that felt meaningful, work that was an extension of the community in which I was able to bring community stories to life. That was the first time that I really had a hand in bringing things to life in that way, where I felt like I was a true partner in the process. So super rich client work. Also did amateur porn. No, not amateur porn. I did the amateur porn film festival, like design work for the Portland Mercury.
Yeah, that's where you stop in that turn. Sentence really changes it.
I'm really sorry. That took a very weird turn.
Is that a rutabaga moment or just
No? That's not a rutabaga moment.
Just to double check.
Are you kidding me? No, it's all good.
Yeah.
And I only mention hump because it's like kind of this like reverence and irreverence is
Yeah.
become a theme, and it's definitely a theme of my work right now. So, but it's the first time where it's like, I'm going to do things with real gravity. I'm going to tell community stories through Oregon Humanities. I'm going to bring them to life. Incredible writing, really focusing on the full experience of Oregon, diverse perspectives, marginalized communities, just beautiful storytelling with that. And then also I'm going to do things on the side that are more on the profane, irreverent side.
Yeah.
And I love that. That brings me joy to have a range of work, and to, you know, so much of the work I'm reflecting on like some of the skills. When I think about mistakes, I think about skills. You know, now that I'm in a different sort of position, I think about like when I was struggling the most, what was the thing that would have made things easier?
Yeah.
Like my biggest mistakes were in struggling and not knowing how to work out of that struggle. Whereas now I've had enough therapy to know where to ask for help and where there could be a pivot or a 180 that is something's not meeting my relational need here. So much of this design work is highly relational, and it requires those relational skills. And I think that though I've learned through the process of all these projects, these last few years with the Port of Portland, I think I've learned the most because I'm part of a much bigger ecosystem. Whereas when you're calling all of the shots, it's a little easier, except you do need to like tell your clients stories or become the best sort of design service professional in delivering what they want to communicate.
Yeah. Well, it's also interesting to think of like, you know, Hump is a Portland Mercury joint in a lot of ways with The Stranger. And like you, in returning to that client with all the knowledge that you've gained from these like more formal like exercises too, like it's a way of like, oh yeah, I can really show like the growth that these other things have given me too in returning to irreverence and silliness. You know?
Nudity.
Yeah. Oh, a lot of that. That's sort of the core premise in a lot of ways. I'm gonna guess Oregon Humanities Magazine has a little less of that. Just
a little.
Probably. But yeah, so like you're getting into this freelance game and trying to make all these pieces work together and building up a studio from it with a lot of different relationships across town. Like how do you make that work in a Portland that is also starting to change too?
Yeah. Yeah, how do you make that work? You know, I think that one of the things that was a big factor in my success was when I first left my job and was wanting to be solo. I had found an ad in Craigslist for an office space that was a few blocks away from my house. And my husband said to me, "It's like, you're never going to make it if you don't like have an office. You know, you need a space to work." And it was a really great rate, and it was right down the street. And being in that office, I think, was one of the best things I could have done because I set 9 to 5 hours.
Yeah.
You know, I really diligently worked in that office on that client work. So that was staying consistent and having a container and a commitment to myself to my work life was a huge factor of my success. I also think that I had a lot of anxiety about financial survival. Yeah. And so there's some ways that I feel like, and I don't feel like it's a mistake, but I feel like I took so many things on that when I look back, it's like, did it need to be as hard as it was, even though I loved the work I was doing? I loved the clients I was working for. And it's hard to parse. You know, I was successful in meeting some of my goals. You know, there's that kind of treading water feeling of like, well, this worked this month. I hope it keeps working. Yeah. And I think that's always the case with a freelance and with self-employment, you know, or often can be the case. It was for me the whole time. Well, so I saw a lot of ups and downs throughout that time.
And that becomes a bigger question too when there's other people in the picture. Like you're raising a family at this point too.
Yep. Yep. I have 2 delightful children and a wonderful husband. I had both of my children while I worked there in that office, and I was lucky enough to be able to walk home to like nurse or snuggle my kids and then come back to work. So yeah, that I think really did ratchet up the pressure for sure. And I think my level of professionalism, I've always felt like I never was able to take myself too seriously. And I think there's some benefits to that. And I think sometimes I'm like looking back, this is like a Jen Wick, This Is Your Life, this podcast. I really appreciate that because it is like, okay, chapter 1, chapter 2. But the gratitude is the biggest feeling that I have for being able to have gone through a lot of different phases in a creative career and to be able to continue to be in the creative career. It's not always been easy, and I've learned so much about myself. I've learned so much about how to communicate. Most of the lessons I have learned, I can map onto every relationship in my life. I can map to, they're useful lessons.
Yeah.
Because a lot of them really are about communication and like asking for what you need, figuring out what's working and what's not working, asking if, doing the debrief and asking. I used to be terrified of that. And now it's part of my practice to always ask, how did that go for you?
Yeah. Well, but that's also, I feel like that's the secret thing. I certainly never learned anything vaguely like that in my life or in design school up until recently. And the whole idea of this is a field that is graphic, but it is communication design is maybe the better term for it, even though that sort of has its own separate bottle of meaning. Because like it isn't just what goes on the paper. It is the relationships that you're forming and the dialogue that you're having and making sure that everybody is on the same page and that you're not just like on autopilot going into something that at a late stage will be obliterated by some other entity.
Right. And that's interesting, that phrase, because it's like every project has a different matrix of like efficiency and creativity.
Yeah.
And we're often trying to manage that a lot in my role now, where it's like, okay, well, how much do we really need to do to be successful versus what's the most creative thing that we could do, an ambitious thing that might not net the results we want.
Yeah.
Or maybe exactly what we want. We want to rev really hard on creativity, but it's not going to be super efficient. So yeah, I think there's also like this nature of design that is, that we can be honest about, where there is there's always going to be this power balance and extractive nature of the field, and like what kind of company you're working for. What is it that they're selling? What is it that you're communicating? And is that true? And is it valuable?
Yeah.
Or is it part of these things that are sort of meant to, feed the machine, so to speak? So, and I understand that, people are trying to fit their way into this career in many ways. And there's all kinds of different careers that are visual. And there are all kinds of levels of influence that people can have throughout their career. And that's where even thinking about like when my experience changed from being a production designer to the art director, it's like I had to look at the whole paper and not forget the ad.
Yeah.
And now my experience is really different because it's really like I'm looking at the people and like what we can do together, and not so much what can Jen do on her own to like please a client, but really what can I do to manage a team to do the best work that they want to do in their career. So that part of that is really exciting to me. And there's a lot of mistakes there too, but they're different. So it's like keep making different mistakes, I think is the best like way to think about it.
I mean, I think that's a good modus operandi for all of us, including me.
Maybe there's
person
a
who
Five
repeatedly
Guys.
makes the same
Maybe
mistake.
there's a lesson about Five Guys in here for you. Don't keep making the same mistakes.
Don't keep kicking the same dead horse.
Yes.
Find a different dead horse to kick. Actually, maybe let the horses live.
Have you thought about Carl's Jr.?
Oh, but then we have to cover the whole Hardee's split. I don't know. That's a whole. Why is it different? I don't know. Yeah. Plus, if it gets all over the place, I don't want it in my face. That's too much of a mess. Is that
Five Guys?
Well, yeah, that's also a mess, I think. They just wrap their burgers in just regular ass Reynolds wrap. It's not even like a special packaging or anything. It's like just a burger you get from a gas station or something is what it looks like. These are the most expensive burgers.
I'm not sure that they're the best sponsor for you. I think I really am. I'm starting to wonder.
My agitation with them does seem to be reaching a peak level in the course of this recording.
Whatever it is that we have a lot of energy around, there's really a lesson there. There's really like a lesson about, I think it's like futility. I think it's precarity.
Yeah.
You have a precarious relationship and that it doesn't really exist.
It's interesting that you bring up those two words because it does seem like those are the two watchwords for my entire life experience at this moment.
Ooh, let's get into this.
Oh boy.
Okay. Moving on.
Yeah. Moving on. So you're working, really having to hustle to get all these jobs going to, keep the studio running. Like, where does that start to feel like maybe I want to pivot? Maybe I want to do something else?
It's funny. It didn't really happen in the way I wasn't looking, but the pandemic happened. So things had really slowed down for me. I got a lot of new work that I wasn't expecting at the same time that I lost and never got back a lot of work.
Yeah. The nonprofit ecosystem lost a lot of money very rapidly during that time.
Yep.
As I also found out.
Yeah.
A cool time.
It was a painful time for everybody. And we're still experiencing the aftershocks of it. And quite honestly, it's still happening. Like COVID's not over. Like,
no.
It's still a thing. But what happened was I was recruited. So there was a person that reached out to me, and they were looking for a creative services manager, and Tripp Somerville had been a big consultant with our team and is still a consultant with our team. What happened was they hadn't had luck finding exactly what they were looking for. And a bunch of people had recommended me because of my work in civic spaces and in these civic projects and organ humanities. I had done a number of big projects for the city of Portland as well that were really, I think had a bit more public exposure.
Yeah.
And I had an interview. I really liked them, but I felt like I felt like I was really loving being at home more. Like it was a really rich time, I think, for me with my children to just downshift.
Yeah.
I quit drinking. It was like a really good opportunity for me to recenter myself. I went into some recovery work around childhood. It was great. It was like a really, really rich time. And then 6 months later, one of my big clients was slowing down. And I was just starting to languish a bit. And they reached back out to me months later and said, hey, just wondering if anything changed. Totally understand if it hasn't. But we would love to talk to you about maybe someone like you that would be a good fit for this. And then I said, wait a minute. I think I actually want this job myself. Can we talk? And then I did the interview and I did the panel. And it was wonderful. And so I've been there ever since. I've been there 3.5 years. Really, it's been incredible. Of course, the PDX airport just opened. Yeah,
Port of Portland manages the airport, the beloved Portland International Airport. It had the project that has been going on there that is really completely transformed the airport from what it was. Was that part of what they were bringing you on for? How much was that still in the works then?
It definitely was one of the reasons why they brought me on. And I had no idea when I took the job. I really didn't. It was I had no idea that PDX Next would be my entire life for the next 3.5 years.
Wow.
And is still a big part of my life, where it's a, really ambitious civic project. It's, the port did things differently. And so part of our job is really talking about how did the region come together to make PDX the localest airport that's ever been made.
Yeah.
And there's so many great stories in that. And we have a lucky job where the stories are real. They're beautiful stories. There's so many stories. And I had no clue that giant Post-it notes would be the first project that I worked on was the giant Post-it notes that have been in the airport. And I think that's where this theme of irreverence and irreverence, we have 4 tribal partners and we're telling their stories and there's a reverence there to telling those stories. But we also aren't treating them different than other partners in that, they're living people in this time and we want them to tell their stories.
Yeah.
We don't want to, elevate some stories that are special in this way that could be paternalistic. It's really we want all the stories to come to the surface, but we also want to have fun with the public doing that. And we want to talk to people like a friend.
Yeah. Well, and it's a weird balance of this is a very official space that has official purposes and strict security regulations and all that fun stuff. But then it's also so much of what people going back to the carpet thing, being such a energy when I first moved here of what makes this airport different is that it is fun to be in, and it's nice, and it's, affordable and pleasant,
Yep. It feels like home.
Yeah.
That's why people take pictures of a carpet with their feet on it. Is there something about carpet that feels like you're home? It feels like you're taken care of. People have such a strong emotional connection to the airport.
Yeah.
And that is a gift to work with because we have a public that really was able to appreciate it. And I think that was the one big communications challenge was when they asked people what do you want to change about the airport? They were like, nothing.
Yeah.
So it's well, we have to change it.
Yeah.
So how can you change it? How can you communicate around the construction? Because, we've been working on comms for the airport. Well, the airport only just opened, but we've been working on comms for years.
Yeah.
So using the disruption as a tool to build more brand equity and pride for both PDX and the region was the whole point of the communications program. And so, and one of the big points of all this work with the port is really that it's a group effort. There's many brilliant people on our comms team. Katie Meeker is the director of communications and strategy for PDX Next. And so she's been a vision holder for this reverence and irreverence for the whole time of how do we bring this to life in a way that's not boring?
Yeah.
How do we bring this in a life that's uniquely human? And so that's, what better project could you ask for in terms of the public goodwill, really rich and meaningful stories, a really great team to work with, and we're making giant Post-it notes.
Well, it's making this construction space feel joyful.
Yes. I mean, at the heart, an airport is the welcome mat for the whole region.
Yeah.
And it is such a service-oriented place of meeting people's needs that talking to people like a friend is kind of a no-brainer, but it's actually a challenging strategy to sell because it's well, but don't we want to tell them about X, Y, and Z? And it's we want to connect with them first.
Yeah.
And then we can tell some of these richer stories about how many contracts went to all these different small businesses to make this happen, and inviting those small businesses to be part of that story. So that's been really, really fun. And because the theme of this is mistakes, I do think that when I think about some of the, mistakes or some of the challenges of being in this environment, it's really learning how to work with a lot of different kinds of stakeholders on something that's pretty complex and to do that in a way that holds the center and that makes sure that everybody is getting what they need. And in fact, getting what you need is sort of a sub-theme for all of the mistakes that I've made too, where I think about some of the suffering I've had is by not just asking for what I need to do the work the way that, I want to do it or to understand something better. So,
well, it's like communication, but we were also talking beforehand about you learn the value of leadership, learning how to talk with people and especially nonviolent communication, finding ways to talk about a problem where everyone can kind of be included and find some place to grow from and find some common ground. That's hard work.
Yours is my favorite topic, nonviolent communication. It's just, thank you for bringing it up.
Of course.
Yeah, I mean, that's just a rich part of my practice, personal practice, and my work practice has really been learning this language of life is what Marshall Rosenberg calls it. It's the language of life is the language of needs, essentially. But how do we exist? And I think this is so useful in creative spaces, is how do we exist in a space where judgment as a energy is something that we're able to utilize thoughtfully and to, there's nothing wrong. Judgment just tells us what we value.
Yeah.
But it can also, that language can really disconnect us from other people. And so understanding that what the needs are for a project even is the whole point of having a strategy where it's what are our objectives? What is our aim here? And how do we go about doing that in the best way possible? So when managing a team, it's nonviolent communication has been this tool that has allowed me to identify what the needs are a little bit better and to be able to express that in a way that isn't going to disconnect.
Yeah.
And sometimes it can be something very tedious, around how we manage our file system, or it can be about the bigger values of whether we do a project that people are attached to or whether we truly don't have the resources for it. So understanding the needs behind that is just like such a great tool to getting a better outcome.
Yeah, it's like it's an empathy exercise, and I think like it's so easy to forget that we're not artists in the sense that we're just self-expression. It's like all we do is empathy, and you know
That's a good point.
That has to start with how we talk
that.
about problems with our clients and with our other stakeholders and with our team to be able to find what is the common ground that we can make this thing from. Like,
that is beautiful.
Thank you.
Did you write that down beforehand? That's great.
No, all I have in my notes is about Five Guys, so it's that's not.
No,
That's
I
not
think
anything.
that's so true. I think that's so true. Empathy is such a crucial part of our communications work as visual communicators as well, you know, and understanding what it is that's worth telling and understanding the angle in which we're communicating and who we're leaving out of conversations when we have certain conversations. So that empathy piece is a really big one. I think that's a good one to bring up.
Yeah, and all the more important when you are creating the face of a public entity that everyone, be them visitor or resident, is eventually going to have to interface with.
Yeah.
Like I'm looking at your doc, and like right down at the bottom, you've got 3 of Sister Karita's rules.
Yes, I do.
Do you want to talk about those?
Sure.
Because like start off with rule 6. Personally, one of my favorite rules. Nothing is a mistake. There's no win and there's no fail. There's only make.
Right. I mean, there's a reason why these rules our dear sister Karita Kent, our brilliant activist, social justice nun who had a printmaking studio as part of the practice. You know, when I think about mistakes, it's like, I do come back to these like on and off throughout my whole career. Yeah. Like I think I first was exposed to this through Kate, through PSU was the first time I really got to know like the Sister Karita Kent work. And that nothing is a mistake, there's no win and no fail, there's only make is such a reassuring message for creatives of all stripes.
Yeah, that's the secret message of the show, everybody. Shh, don't tell anyone. Then I have to change all the marketing materials. I don't have that kind of time.
If you whisper, it'll be subliminal. No one will know. I also like rule number 7, the only rule is work.
Yeah.
Because I think we have a funny relationship to work because we have such anxious attachment living in this, you know, sort of
precarity,
late stage racialized capitalism. And, you know, people are not getting their needs met.
No.
You know, there is a certain sense of collapse and doom and this, and the idea of meritocracy and that working hard is going to get you what you deserve isn't true. It's just not how that works. But I also think that there is a sense of working towards what we care about is like putting effort towards things we believe in.
Yeah.
And so the only rule is work is just meaning like as you show up for what matters, you will make progress, you will learn, you will develop, you will grow. You will develop a body of something if you put energy into it. So I love that one.
Well, I also love it in contrast to the other one that you pulled out here, which is Rule 9. And I in a way, like what we've been talking about with PDX, I think is really the combination of these rules. Like Rule 9, be happy whenever you can manage it. Enjoy yourself. It's lighter than you think. Like in a lot of ways, that's kind of where you're starting in your career. And then you go a little bit more towards, you know, like Rule 7, and then now you're kind of meshing all of them together. Like this is a joyful, fun, light experience, but it's also important work, and you got to just power through and find the ways to talk about it that are like, you know, getting everybody what they need out of it.
Yes, and that's so true. I really like that, and I think that because joy and enjoyment is more a part of my practice right now than it has been in a few years, I think I maybe want to pull up another rule, which is like find a place that you trust and stay there a while. Yeah. Where it just, you know, I think that everyone needs different ingredients to find meaning and satisfaction in their life. For me, this work has been, you know, I do a lot of work that is in service to community elsewhere in my life. Right now, I'm learning how to be a non-skating official in roller derby and learn how to use a whistle.
Hold on. What?
It's just a side note. I've been very involved in my school. I believe in public schools and was very involved in the PTA over the last few years. And work for me has always been this place of like both great personal and professional challenge and also pure survival.
Yeah.
Like it really just, there's a practical nature for me in work.
Yeah.
And so right now it's like that be happy whenever you can manage it is also knowing when you're in an environment in which things are good. And right now I have an awesome team and everybody is like, the whole team that we have are just, they're talented. Everyone's bringing something different and unique to the table. There's different perspectives that make the work better. And just there's a harmonious quality. The one unfortunate thing is that our trusted leader is moving on and we love her so much. So that's like the only thing that's, sort of like, there's also sweet and tender joy in like watching transitions happen. Like we've been very lucky to be in the environment that we've been in, I think, to work on the PDX project. A project that has so many meaningful stories. So right now, be happy whenever you can manage it is sort of like the thing that I'm holding on to while I learn how to whistle. By the way, it is not.
I'm so glad we get to come back to that.
It is not intuitive. You think you know how to whistle through a whistle you just blow through. You do not.
No.
Because you have to use your tongue to do certain kinds of whistles as an officiant of a sport that you barely know.
There's like, you're like playing an instrument almost.
Yeah, you have to do this thing where it's like 3 bursts of 4, where it's like do 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 do. That's if you're a jam timer official, which is what I'm trying to learn how to do. It's so fun.
The specifics of being able to do that, I don't think I could. I
actually was hoping that this would come up.
Yeah.
And I was going to bring my whistle. It's in the car. But I didn't want to like break your eardrums by whistling into this giant microphone.
Yeah, the recording equipment may not like that so much.
It seems disrespectful.
I'm trying to think of if I've heard whistles on other podcasts. I do feel like it is somewhat rare. But I think you described it really well.
I tried.
Maybe, here's a thought. Maybe you can go get the whistle and then we'll put it at the end of the recording. And then people can choose, unless they're in an environment where they can't stop the recording. Maybe they're tied up for some reason.
Oh, I will whistle. You just watch me whistle. I've been practicing in my car for an entire week. Because my first training day, I just thought I'd nail it. And then they're like, you don't know how to whistle. They had to show me how to whistle.
I do love the idea that you're in like the very back of a parking lot somewhere and then somebody is like going to work and they're just hearing what the hell is that?
No, it's me at a stop sign with a whistle in my mouth and someone looks over and sees me whistling and like with full energy. Yes.
Yeah, you're the referee of the road.
Totally. I'm just whistling for fun. I'm practicing my craft.
You've stopped over the white line. You must reverse your car.
In Portland, you never know what kind of instrument people are going to practice.
Yeah, I mean, this is maybe one step towards you being the next Unipiper.
We actually hired the Unipiper for our big grand party.
That's a good choice, actually.
The PDX airport opening party, yeah.
Unipiper also has a fire component now, I seem to recall.
Yeah, that was not approved by the operations people at the airport.
Indoor fire in Wood Airport probably would not be a good mix.
No.
Yeah, one's...
I think even the llamas are pushing it.
Special airport for llamas, I think, is maybe our next big need as a community. Yeah. Thank you so much for being here, Jen.
Sean, thank you. This has been so much fun.
I wanted to have you as a guest for so long, and I'm so glad that you could be here. I kept
rescheduling for so long, so I really appreciate it.
Well, you're busy. You're a very busy person.
Yeah, I'm very busy.
It takes a lot to take a bunch of hours out of your day to come to the weirdest corner of downtown and go into a very sketchy building.
Yeah, the Rat's Nest. Affectionately titled.
Yeah, they're really going to be excited about these Oreos. Tell you what, I got to get these out of here. But if people want to learn more about you and the projects that you do, where can they go to do that? Nowhere. They're not allowed?
No. I have fortwick.com is my old studio website. So it's got some nice things about me from years ago. Portofportland.com is where I work, and pdxnext.com is our biggest project. So those are the 3 places you can see the ecosystem of the Gen Wick universe.
Yeah, and you can probably just go to the airport also and experience a lot of the work that you've done. I would imagine it's just all around.
Or have lunch with me, or see me, or even just see me there.
You're just hanging out.
I am probably hanging out.
Is your office actually at the airport?
It's above the parking garage.
Wow. So you really get to experience this every single day. Like,
totally.
That's wild. I imagine it's also fairly convenient because we're lucky enough that, friends, if you live in another city and your airport is like 20 miles out of your city, looking at you, Pittsburgh, how did that end up being where your airport is? PDX is very convenient.
It's very convenient.
Pretty easy to get to from whatever way you want to get to it. So yeah, go have lunch with Jen.
Yeah, brought to you by PDX Next, Oreo, Coca-Cola, and Five Guys.
The brand triangle is complete. And also, hey, thank you out there to all of our listeners for listening to this. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe if you haven't already, and tell anyone and everyone you know about this show. I guess don't tell Five Guys, or do. I don't really know. I don't know how it works. Whatever way doesn't get me in trouble is the one that I want. So if you have some sort of crystal ball where you can find out how I don't get in trouble from doing this, go with that one. If there's maybe somewhere else that you would rather hear the show, why not visit dididothat.design and check out all the options. That's also where you can find some good images that go along with each and every episode, and where you can go to follow us on both Instagram and via our brand new newsletter. I'm also going to take a minute to plug, because this is our last episode that is coming out. I believe it's coming out exactly a week before our Fontroversy live show as part of the AIGA Design Conference. We are going to be on the main stage on Thursday, October 10th, I believe 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern. But yeah, you can see me and Lena Hall talking about a particular font live on stage. If you go to the AIGA Design Conference fully online, you can get tickets and registrations and whatever things that you need on aiga.org. That's pretty much all I got. This has been Did I Do That? I'm Sean Schumacher, and as we always say at the close of every episode,
did I do that?
That's what we always say. Okay, bye. Very good.
Wow, Sean. Wow. What a journey. My husband mentioned to me, he was like, are you going to talk about nonviolent communication? I was like, of course I am. Well, one funny thing about nonviolent communication, if you follow a link on the nonviolent communication website and you get to the 404 page,
yeah,
it says, and I quote, "You have never made a mistake." And you never will make a mistake. If you know then what you know now, then you wouldn't have done it in the first place.
Wow.
That's a generative read right there.
I bet that was a complicated conversation to have with their web developer. That's the whistle, everybody. Okay, bye.